Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen April 12th meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Chairman, all members of the Board of Selectmen are present with the exception of Mrs. Winslow, and the Town Administrator, Mike Andrews, is also present.
Announcements? No announcements? Citizens' participation? Yes. Come on, right, and address the mic.
I have three questions, and I'd like
You want
to
to speak
ask
into the
them
mic?
all. And if you can't hear me, please let me know. Can you hear me, everybody? Okay. All right. I'm sorry? All right. All right. There are three basic questions that I'd like to ask. I'd like to address our new chairman, and probably Mr. Andrews also, and all of you, because they're general questions, and I'd like to put them all together. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. Mary Nyman, Precinct 3. And I've lived here since 1961. These are three basic questions. They're all related. Answer if you can, I'd appreciate it. I'm wondering about the signs that say we want Chief Stanley or we want a recall. I would like to know who is behind this and why. That's my first question. My second question has nothing to do with the quality of our Chief of Police's work. He's been wonderful, and I can speak for his force because about 6 of them were my high school students, and they're marvelous in the force. But I'm wondering whether or not a contract has been finalized with Chief Stanley, and this is the reason why. I've heard 2 rumors. One, the Chief of Police at Wareham will receive $180,000 a year and have a housing allowance on top of that for another $24,000. The second rumor is that the chief will receive an annual salary of $160,000 with a housing allowance on top of that for $24,000. Is there any truth in either of these rumors? And this leads to my third question, which shouldn't be impacted by any contract negotiations. And if Chief Stanley is listening again, I think he's doing a great job, so it has nothing to do with a praiseworthy performance. My last question is this. How much can a town like Wareham, given its makeup and income level, afford to pay a police chief without laying off personnel? What's a ballpark figure for an annual salary? What are towns around us paying? And those are my 3 questions, my 3 statements, just the way I'm seeing things right now as a citizen of Wareham.
Thank you. On the first one, the signs, I don't know anything about it. It was on town property, and we had them removed.
Okay, thank you.
It was illegal to put it on town property, so that's what we did. And rumors are just rumors. That's exactly what they are.
Oh, good. Okay, that makes me feel
facts.
better.
So, on the third one, repeat again. I think that would be
the third one is a more general question. How much can a town like Wareham, given its makeup and income level, afford to pay a police chief without laying off personnel, for example? What's a ballpark figure for an annual salary? What are towns around here paying their police chief? Does anybody have any answers for
Mr.
that?
Chairman, through you to Mrs. Nyman, we have a chief that's working for us right now with 25 years of experience as a police chief, uninterrupted, so that fact is into the equation. My understanding of surrounding communities, I think the town of Bourne recently moved the sergeant up to chief in the 147, 149 range, and that's up to the town of Bourne.
All right.
But in this budget, built back in December, was a factor to be able to cover whatever expenses that we had going forward as a charge to me that the board made to get Chief Stanley under contract and to do that within the budget, so it's built into the budget as we speak. And at that juncture, I'd like to announce I'm in the final stages of negotiating a contract. It's fairly complex, but it really only has 2 parts to it. One, his salary, and what he would earn with respect to his degrees in time, educational degrees, over a period of time, and that's really where we are right now.
Is that, will the salary be close to the one that's in Bourne, for example, or Marion, or one of the other towns around here?
I think the discussion's going to come up in a little bit, so... you know,
Okay, I didn't know, I didn't see it on the agenda, that's why.
It is on the agenda. It's under, and it has been for months now, under Chief of Police contract negotiations.
Clerk, I think we're going to stick to the agenda, and when we get to it, we're going to
Thank
get to
you.
it. So,
Thank you very
if you're
much. That
finished,
helps.
thank
I feel better.
Right.
I feel
think
better
I-
about the rumors.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Anything, anyone else for citizen participation?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Peterson. I live in Blackmore Pond in West Wareham. I'm just going to elaborate a little more on a similar set of questions that Ms. Nyman asked. But for Mr. Andrews, you just stated that the budget was developed in December. The governor's budget was not released until late January. We will not have the Ways and Means budget until tomorrow. So if that budget was predicated back in December, how are we going to offset the 7% cut that is coming from the state, as well as the unaccounted $919,000? So with those two lack of revenue sources at this time, our budget is at least 5% less than it was when December would have been the creation of that budget. So when it comes to the Chief of Police, my question directly is, what are we going to forego in order to afford this? We have very little reserves left. We have very little in stabilization funds. We have aging properties and capital everywhere that need immediate attention, such as the Stonebridge issue that we had less than 2 months ago. Luckily, we had funds in another area. So what is it that the town's going to forego? We do not have safe parks. We already have issues with buses. We already have issues with other safety concerns within our community. So although Mrs. Stanley has done a phenomenal job, as people have noted, where is that money going to come from? We have to offset these funds that we're going to appropriate for his salary, because the salary isn't just salary. We have to pay additional state tax. We have to pay additional federal tax. We have to pay, as I'm sure you're aware, as a business owner, I was informed that both the state and federal unemployment insurance is tripling. So the liability to the town is going to be astronomical in general. So I guess I just want to know what we're going to forego in our budget.
If I could, through Mr. Chairman, through you to Ms. Peterson.
Excuse me, 1 minute. Are you
I am
complete?
finished, sorry.
Okay.
I thought I heard it winding down to a tone.
Yeah, I did wind down. I just
Okay.
wanted to give the viewers an
Okay.
understanding of where our budget's at, because the governor's budget.
Let's start from home base,
Okay.
which is, yes, you are correct, and this has been talked about at the last town meeting, that December 14th is not the best date to pick a number for
Right.
your state aid. We receive $1.5 million in unrestricted aid. The school district gets about $12.5 million. So that's a part of a $60 million corporation. That's number one. And by the way, we've been adjusting this going forward, and I have been in touch with the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Brian Dempsey, and his staff, literally on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis to figure out what direction that they're going in. So that's number one.
But that's not released until tomorrow.
Well, they're going to, my understanding, and if I could skip right to the, really, this is the haymaker punch.
Right.
I believe in talking with Senator Pacheco, our state senator, he has indicated that a joint resolution on local aid will be coming out of the legislature very shortly. That's the good news. So we're going to be told right up front what's in the state aid equation and what's not. So there will be no more guessing. Last year, the state legislature wound up their part of the budget on June 28th. That was a month or so before right after town meeting had concluded. So that's number one. Just on the reserves, let me be clear, because it's in the budget, and we can get you the number exactly. This board and I have submitted my budget balanced for the last fiscal year, balanced this year. that will be certified by our independent accountants, auditors, excuse me, and we've put in $100,000 over the past several years, $150,000 last year, and $150,000 this year. We're building those reserves back up. But that's a rainy day fund that I can say to you that I'm proud of. With respect to Chief Stanley, and I'll just say this, it's up to this body to give me some guidance, but as far as I'm concerned, I have not seen a more dynamic public safety official in my 30 years of experience in public service. So you can tell me whatever your feelings are. I'm happy to answer the questions that you have. I'll just answer this on unemployment. Unemployment's a very tricky thing, just to be clear. We just had 2 individuals come off of unemployment, saving us about $30,000 off our unemployment fund because they've moved off that role. It's tricky because the federal government and state government can extend it, and we're caught with a line item in our budget that we've passed. So what we'll do is continue to look at those lines and to build back that reserve that's going to give us that rainy day for the future. But I think our future, in my opinion, is about the people that are on the leadership team day to day, working the programs. We had a safe summer 2010 last year. I intend to have a safe summer 2011, keep working it. The street corners are being taken back literally as we speak, in my opinion, not only by Chief Stanley, but by the fine men and women that are in our force.
So what are we going to forego? I mean, you have to have a budget that goes.
Yeah, I made in other words, this is not a debate. It's a citizen participation. You ask the question, you answer it, and then we'll move on. And I appreciate your questions. And so we have next, if you don't mind.
All right.
Thank you. We're going to have a lot on the agenda, it looks like. It's the first time I heard it, so if we can just move on, I appreciate it, unless somebody has something other than Stanley. Okay. Westfield.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Mr. Town Administrator. First of all, before I begin my report, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to congratulate you for your selection as chair and the confidence that your board has invested in you. I'd also like to congratulate the 2 new members of the Board of Selectmen. I know that it was a honest and well fought campaign, and I think the community is well served, and I would suggest that we're all looking forward to your leadership in the community. So thank you very much for stepping up, and congratulations on your election. As far as Westfield is concerned, we met last Thursday to complete our draft of the document. Our chairman, in fact, to his credit, did the drafting work. We went over it, reviewed it. We may review it one final time at our last meeting, but essentially I can report to you that the draft of the article is substantially complete. We have a couple of outstanding issues. Mr. Andrews has assisted us. He gave us the support of the town planner, Mr. Charbonneau. And the 2 outstanding issues there, of course, as we've discussed in the past, were the affordable housing count, the official number, as well as the 2010 census data. And that's very important to us because that is a reflection on how close we are to meeting the community's 10% affordable housing threshold. I know that we have, as of record, 754 units. That's the official record, at least according to DHCD, through the town planner. The only outstanding issue is that the official full-time housing statistic has not been verified by DHCD. It's in the order of 10,100, I believe, which puts us about approximately anywhere from 650 to 65 to anywhere from 65 to over 250 units short, depending upon where that actual figure comes in and what's accepted by DHCD as far as our full-time housing statistic. If it is in excess of 200 units, that's where the debate is starting to happen on the committee, and we will eventually be coming forward to you for some guidance. because the issue there is whether or not this project, as conceived by the Board of Selectmen, should expand beyond the 200 units that was originally envisioned. If you remember, the original RFP and the vote of town meeting was between 150 and 200 units. The question, of course, is should we expand that project? If so, that's a Board of Selectmen decision solely, and whether or not that is outside of the original scope of the article, which means if the Board of Selectmen wish to pursue that, I would assume, have to go back to town meeting to expand the article, or whether or not the original charge of the article was simply to provide the Board of Selectmen the authority to seek RFPs within the constraints of the original RFP 150 to 200. If that is the case, and the Board of Selectmen so directs us, then certainly that's how we will handle the final draft instrument. But the board, I will say that the committee hasn't had that discussion. We haven't even arrived at our own consensus. I'm just raising it as an issue because this will clearly be coming as a future issue that we're going to need to bring before the board. So in that respect, we have been informed that DHCD won't commit to an official number. The question is whether or not the board will be okay with us using the unofficial number, which is the federal census number, so that we can get the draft document to you as quickly as possible, so that we're not holding this back until summertime, May, June, which is the estimate of DHCD's final numbers. So those are really the two issues. Pardon me, that we're going to need some specific guidance on from the Board of Selectmen. Other than that, we've requested that the exhibits that are attached be sent to us in a Word formatable document. Mr. Charbonneau, I believe, is working on that, and I believe is responsible for getting that to us. And so we're still waiting for that, but once we have that, we'll certainly incorporate that into the final draft document to be presented to the board for further discussion. We're requesting that once that happens, that we have another joint meeting with the board, a workshop sort of meeting, and we can get clear direction from you at that point.
So as of right now, so we'll wait until you get back with us before we schedule to come back on the agenda. Yeah, wait. Question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think that what we would prefer to do is have a discussion with the committee on that issue concerning expanding the project if need be, and then come back to the board as part of our workshop discussion on that matter. And we are waiting for the final information that we can incorporate, but the real discussion, I believe, should be scheduled once we've had our discussion, so that we can render at least an opinion to the board and then schedule a final sit-down discussion.
Any questions from the board, Mr. Holmes?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Bruce, thank you again. If I'm looking at my calendar here, I saw something from John Charbonneau today. Those are, I think, PDF documents, though, right? You're looking for the Word?
We need them converted.
A copy of those. I'm going to go to view month here. So you have another meeting on this Thursday, the 14th. You think you can wrap that up in one more night? I just want to, I don't want to go too much past our original time frame.
My personal opinion, if you're asking my personal opinion, not speaking for the...
Well, I'm asking you as somebody who's been at all the meetings of the group, and you're the one who came here, so you think you can do it in this week, if Mr. Charbonneau gets you, at least to review the documents, right? And then maybe, Mr. Chair, we could schedule and post a joint meeting for the following Thursday, or do you think that's, am I asking too much?
No, I believe that helps us as far as giving us a tight framework, which frankly helps us operate, and I think that's fine.
I've been trying to do that since the beginning, as you know, because I don't want this thing to meander.
I certainly appreciate that, and I will bring that direction back to the committee. Personally, on my personal opinion is that we certainly could get the work done in one evening if we push hard and we stay focused and we commit to a date certain.
All right.
Any other questions from the board?
Well, Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd like to make a motion, if I could, that we schedule a joint meeting of the Westfield Recommendations and Review Committee and the Board of Selectmen on April 21st.
Second.
Motion first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? 5-0-0.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Savageau. I do have a question with respect to the charge of the committee. My understanding was that the primary purpose of the article was to provide a substantial number of senior affordable housing units for senior citizens, and also to provide some management and maintenance, possible redevelopment of the fields. What is the status with respect to the drafting of the language related to the fields at this point?
We discussed it as a committee, and we felt that the proper way for that to be drafted, because it will result in a legal contract between the developer and the town, that we would request that town meeting draft that actual instrument. Once we have discussed substantively the issues, we would just pass that along in the form of a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and from that we would request that Town Council draft the legal instrument that which would be attached to the RFP as an exhibit for the management of the fields.
And also, Mr. Savageau, is it the committee's, do you think that it's the committee's consensus of the committee that they want to try and meet the 40B, the number of units that we're still short? We're at 8.7% now.
We're at 8.7%. That's accurate, according to the 2000 census. But as of the 2010 census, we may be substantially below that. And in fact, we may be anywhere in the order of 250 to, frankly, as much as 300 units short of that. If this project is a 200-unit project and we're short 250, the issue now becomes, should the project be expanded to meet or produce those additional 50 units? The math is insidious in the fact that we are chasing a problem that we need to produce more than required. Now, what I will say is, as you well know, as a member of the trust fund, the Affordable Housing Trust, excuse me, that your committee is entertaining several ideas to produce numbers acceptable to DHC that would be countable towards the affordable housing stock. If that were the case, then certainly this is not an impediment. We don't need to expand the project, and we just, at that point, would recommend, in my opinion, just having the Board of Selectmen continue on with the process as defined by the original language of the town meeting that was voted and accepted by allowing the Board of Selectmen to continue on with the process.
And does the Westfield Study Review Committee, do they believe that adding additional units is going to better the bottom line so that they can support the recreational component as well?
We haven't gotten to any financial pro forma at all. We haven't even discussed the financial implication of expanding the project or leaving it as is. It was for the issue solely that we discussed it surrounding the 40B issue. Whether or not that translates into additional revenues to the developer that now provides additional financing to support the fields, I guess that might make some sense, but we would have to see how the RFPs responded to that, and that's the other risk by expanding the project. Without having some real discussion with real developers preliminarily, I'm not sure that we're prepared as a committee or have the expertise to advise the Board of Selectmen on how that might impact the RFP process, if at all. So I don't think I can answer that question not honestly.
Just one last comment, Mr. Savageau. I'd like to see a draft, and I don't know if I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I'd like to see a draft of the language for the recreational component, if that's as quickly as possible, because I think that that's, for me, you know, and I appreciate the work that the committee has done. I know that you've done a lot of work on this RFP, but the RFP, as it stood, produced 5 very good proposals for affordable housing, and basically could have been sent out as it was. It's the recreational piece that needs to be focused on, in my view, and that's the part that I think that the board really needs to see. So,
With that said, I would suggest go back to my committee and suggest that we make a definitive decision as whether or not we should be actually in the business of drafting that instrument, or whether we should have town council draft it, and we would be able to have that discussion Thursday. And we'll do whatever the board advises us to do. But I'm just giving you the flavor of what the discussion was up to this point on that piece of it.
I appreciate that, Mr. Savageau.
Thank you. Mr. Selectman.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, when we have that next meeting on the 21st, you can come back with more information, and then we'll work from there.
All right, thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, also, where is the latest copy with the updates? Because Mr. Schneider and Mrs. Begley need to get them a copy of the latest.
On the
We had
copy-
that meeting on the Saturday with the changes of that latest document.
What I can tell you is that our chairman, again, did this substantive drafting. I think by Thursday, pardon me, we could certainly get that draft to you, and it's most
By
complete
this
form.
Thursday,
Yes,
Bruce?
yes.
Is it's Word, right? You can just send an email?
It is Word. It's
Please.
we could email it, no problem.
Great.
What I mean is Thursday's our meeting, so we could have it by Friday morning.
No, I understand. At least if we could get a copy, the latest copy to Mr. Schneider and Mrs. Begley, because they hadn't seen that.
I'll have the chair take care of it right away.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Consent agenda?
No bills, Mr. Chairman.
Next.
I have two meeting minutes. The first one is from a regular session on January 25th, 2011. Make a motion to approve.
I'll second it, because there's only 2 of us that was here for
Right.
that meeting. Motion made and second. All in favor? Aye. So it'll be 2-0-2. The reason why, ladies and gentlemen, the other selectman is absent today, so there was only 3 of us.
And then we have you have an executive session meeting here from April 21st, 2009. You are the only member of the Board of Selectmen left from that board.
So this will be an easy one.
You want to take these home with you?
Right. We had went over it on this one with attorneys and the town administrator and one of the clerks to make sure there wasn't anything in this executive with negotiations, so we can pass this and take it off hold. And I move that we do that, and I accept it. Thank you.
We don't have any licenses or permits tonight.
No license or permits. Town administrators report.
Mr. Chairman, through you to the board and the listening audience and the audience that's here tonight, if I can ask Gary Buckminster to come up front. Gary here? Yes. Hi, Gary. Do we have props tonight, Mr. Habermaster? Okay. Okay. Gary's going to, Mr. Chairman, through you, very exciting program coming up, of a set of programs. He's going to give you a departmental update, progress report. He's going to provide you for a list of some of our ongoing efforts on coastal cleanup and boating safety, which he has undertaken, and also working on something called Boating Safety Week. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn it over to the Harbor Master, Mr. Gary Buckminster. Gary?
Thank you. May I come up just to give you some paperwork? Thank you. I'm just going to start with some department updates real quick. I know you have a busy schedule, so we're going to start off with our harbor service permits. The permits are going to be mailed out the 1st of May. Permits are for... Yep. Thank you. Sorry. The permits are sent out in May. They're for the boaters, which have moorings, vessels that are on docks. We aggressively attack the excise tax issue with the boaters that are showing vehicle excise tax, real estate excise tax, boat excise tax. They've been, every application has a warning card on it. They need to notify the town, correct whatever issues they have involved with that, involving the tax department. We're also going to aggressively go after people that are not getting their moorings inspected under the bylaws. We're going to also start really pushing the 2-year it's a mooring only system right now, where if you have a boat, a mooring with no boat on it, you can keep the mooring for 2 years, and just in case you do decide to get another boat. We have a waiting list that's very extensive, and people are holding on to it for a large amount of time. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to push the 2-year issue. It's either use it or lose it, and we're going to try and get some people that are actively on the list waiting for their moorings. We are going to do our shellfish relay again this year. We got an unbelievable price on a shellfish 1,000 bushel relay. It's the lowest price in about 10 years that we've received, so it was pretty competitive with a few different companies that harvest for us. It comes out of the Taunton River. It's all tested by the Division of Marine Fisheries to meet certain levels that it's allowable to be brought into our waters into a closed area. We're going to designate 3 new locations, which we're going to use the 1,000 bushel to enhance the stock in these different areas. We're going to focus on a lot of recreational areas, and a brunt of it goes commercially also, because all of the commercial funds that are generated through the commercial licenses do pay for us to be able to run our propagation programs. We had a great interview process with numerous seasonal employees. We've made it a selection of 3 people we're going to fill for the department. This is going to allow us to expand to make sure that we have coverage for the ponds. Glen Charlie and White Island Pond are the 2 largest ponds we have, and Glen Charlie, we've had a lot of issues in the past few years. So we're going to make a gallant effort to be on those ponds and be visible and really push the boating safety. We've spoken with a few of the members of the Wareham Lake Shores Association and neighbors around throughout Glen Charlie Pond, and we're trying to come to a happy medium. Some people don't like the idea of slowing the pond down, but we're going to try and work with everybody so everybody comes together, and we can really have a good team on the pond and make sure that people get back in order a little bit. We've had some pretty bad accidents where some injuries were sustained last year, and a gentleman was in the hospital for, actually, as of December, I knew he was still in there, so, and that happened in August. We have we had a lot of projects. I don't know, for the new members of the board, we appropriated some money back in fall to get some projects done, enhance some of the areas. We looked at engineering the onset pier and pushing for upgrades to the dock system down there. We want to make it user-friendly, more handicap accessible, as much as possible. It's difficult with the docks and tides, so we want to try and make it as user-friendly as possible. I'm hoping if we can, the engineering plans are done by fall, we can start looking into at least the first phase of getting the old stairways removed and get some ramps in there, some new gangways, and then we're going to start focusing on some docks with electricity, a sewer pump station down on the floating docks, a little easier for people to use, appropriate lighting, better setup for larger vessels to be able to come into. We've worked very well with the Marine Resource Committee to really look at that idea, and we're going to keep kicking ideas around. So the restrooms have been repaired. We have non-skid floors in all of the restrooms in Onset now. We've got a security surveillance system that's up and running. We have a new camera system on one side of the buildings because our focus was theft and vandalism on the floating piers on the docks. The camera system can actually zoom all the way across the bay, and you can just about read a license plate on Shell Point. So they're pretty impressive, and they're high definition, so you have good clarity at night. We have surrounding lighting, which will really enhance the locations. Tempest Knob boat ramp, we're in the final phases with the engineers of fixing the storm drain issue. We have a storm drain that has washed out the seawall. We're going to be putting up putting a new catch basin in and reforming the seawall so we don't have an erosion on the bank anymore. The system, it's a new system, so we're going to see how it works. I really have to sit down with the engineers and kick it around, but we had a lot of eelgrass in the area, so we couldn't expand on any outflow pipes, things of that nature, so we went with more of a bubble-up system where the storm drain water collects into one large catch basin, and then as I believe it's about a half an inch of rain, and then it'll start to spill out of a grate on the top of the drain itself into a rock collection system, and then it just naturally goes through the wall and out. So we were questioning some of the issues of erosion in front of the seawall because of that issue, but they've assured us that it's not going to flow that heavily. We'll see. We have a move taking place in our office. We are coming over to the multi-service center here, the second level, the very first office on the left-hand side. We worked with Mr. Burke because he needed some room when they were looking into some different options in his office. It was a win-win for all of us on both departments. It's a good atmosphere in that office for us. We have windows. We never had windows before, so it's nice. And we're in the process of getting some rugs in there and countertops and making it really a nice office for everyone to come in.
Yeah, if I could, just on that point
Yes.
for you, Mr. Chairman, because I think this is important. For years, individuals had to roam the hallways at Town Hall and figure out where they were going to roll out some plans and look over those plans. Those days are over because now we'll have an area within what used to be the Harbor Master's office to have that happen so that the land use services group can come down, whether it be the conservation agent or the town planner, and have meetings actually behind doors where they can talk to people and express themselves a little bit more efficiently. And you're right, you need to have some daylight, some sunlight, and it's a great office that I think will fit your needs going forward very well.
And it will work good for conservation also. We've all discussed the issue, so they'll have a meeting room for all those avenues. Just a real quick one. This is a monofilament recycling program, and what they do is we're going to be putting these in all the locations, such as Bessie Park, some of the areas that are used frequently for fishing, and they do get trash, they get some debris in them, but we're trying to get people that they strip out the reels and they put the line in here on a weekly basis. We go around to each point. We've actually got 26 of them. I don't think we're going to use them all, but they were free through Boat US Foundation. And we're going to post the canister, and they've sent us all of the signs for it. And we're going to, on a weekly basis, we'll go around, we'll collect it all, and we send it back to Berkeley, which is one of the larger manufacturers. In Tri-Lane, I believe, is the second company. But they recycle all of the monofilament line. We on a regular basis, we're going down for birds, cotton, fishing line, and trying to untangle them and rustle them around. So our biggest thing coming up right now is we have a coastal cleanup day, and that's going to be on April 23rd from 10 to 3. It's going to start at the Onset Pier. We're trying to make it a town-wide effort. Anybody that has coastal property, anybody that has beach at their property, if they want to pick up their debris that's been washing up over the years or over a storm, if they collect it, they can call our office. We'll have flyers. Actually, there's a flyer up there. We actually use the Wareham Tech Department. It's their graphic design program at the Wareham High School, and we were able to get basically 22 students to all make different flyers, and every single one of them, if we could have used them all, we would have. It's a absolute wonderful resource, and it didn't cost us anything. And the the teacher was very pleased to have some real-world programs to be able to bring into their class, so it worked out really well. And that's the Keep Wareham Beautiful flyer that's in front of some of you. I believe you have it. If they call us, we're also going to be working with the Wareham Recycling Center, and all the debris that's collected is going to be broken down, plastics, glass, and we'll recycle whatever we can. The rest, unfortunately, we have to dispose of, but we'll make every effort to make sure all the stuff that's collected is gone into the proper areas. The second flyer you have is actually a nice feature. We're going to be doing a life jacket awareness program for the children. We're going to be out on the boats, every boat that we stop. If we have a child, if there's a child on board, they're going to get a certificate for wearing the life jacket. It shows some appreciation for them actually playing a big part in boating safety. I've worked with Mark Salerno, the family, and he is going to give a free ice cream cone to every child that we stop out on the waterways that's wearing the life jackets. It gives the kids a little incentive. It's good for the parents, and it opens their eyes up to the real safety factors that we need to look at for life jackets. Good positive enforcement for the summer. We're going to be offering a boating safety course. It's open to all on May 7th. The location is to be determined because we're trying to see what we have available in some of the town buildings. We're working with the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. The course is going to be $45. It's an 8-hour course, 1 day, and they also offer the training for children between the ages of 12 and 15, which will be able to get their certificate to operate a boat in Massachusetts on their own. And also it offers a certificate from 16 to 17 for jet ski use, because the requirements for kids on jet skis, they cannot operate under 16 without a permit. Actually, under 16 they can't operate at all. 16, 17 they have to have a boater safety certificate, which is accredited by the Coast Guard as well as the Mass Environmental Police. And I will update you as we get the locations. And the final program tonight will be the Boating Safety Day. And again, this is with the Coast Guard Auxiliary. They're going to be having their information trailer available. I've contacted Boat US, CETO, all of our surrounding businesses. We're getting responses from West Marine. We're getting responses from Mass Maritime. The Coast Guard Station is looking into bringing boats down. The Mass Environmental Police will be bringing equipment down. We'll have our displays available. And the gentleman that owns Bananas, unfortunately I don't have my name with him because Jamie spoke with him, but he is willing to donate a kayak for a raffle during the program. We're going to be offering boating safety inspections, and it's open to all, and I hope everybody can swing by and enjoy the day with us. So, and that will be on May 28th from 10 to 3.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, also passing along a hearty thank you from Yvonne Kinsman and Joe Oliveri from Wareham Lakeshore Drive. They tell me you've been phenomenal getting out there in some of the higher safety areas that need some help and providing them with really good service, so that's appreciated.
Thank you. We're going to be providing them with some swim markers for their association beach off of the pond where the boats really, they make the turns with when they're water skiing and whatnot. And we're also going to be marking the area on the southerly side of the pond up by the new dam that they just rebuilt. And we're going to be turning that into a no-wake zone. That's by their, I believe the association calls it Baby Beach. So that's going to be going into a no-wake zone because of the swim area that's there, and it's very restricted in maneuverability. So we're going to be looking at a few other areas and go from there. Our markers are ready to go for Weeweeannock, so we're going to be, at some point, Wareham Boatyard would like to come before the board. He wants to make a contribution to the town. I'd like to get it approved by the Board of Selectmen, where he's going to be lighting some of the markers for us, and it'll just help aid some of the boaters traveling in and out of the Weeweeannock. It's if any of you have been down there, it's quite treacherous.
Mr. Chairman, one last thing. I just want to thank Gary for participating. We just kicked off Safe Summer 2011.
Yes, we did.
He's a very valuable player in that mix of department heads, and we'll keep the board posted on it as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you.
Mr.
I
Chairman.
went by your office today, and I think you're starting off right, so I'll be checking in and want to see the progress.
I got all the rug out before the meeting. So
Yeah, I noticed it tonight, so that was good.
Mr. Chairman, just very quickly, for the cleanup on April 23rd, do you want folks to contact you?
Absolutely.
to-
They can contact us. We're gonna provide gloves, bags, and we'll target key beaches in town, public access areas. We have a lot of areas that we really could, but I wanted to turn it into a weekend event. However, we have Easter and more important family events taking place right now.
Great.
So one day we'll do what we can. Like I said, it's a town-wide event. I hope neighbors, people talk, call, and we'll get right down to them and pick up any debris that they have also and do what we can to start cleaning up our shorelines.
Absolutely. I participated in a cleanup with you on Merchants
Yes,
Way,
Merchants Way.
a while ago, and I'll
We
tell you,
filled the dump truck.
if anybody thinks that they can keep up with Gary Buckminster, it's a tough job.
I think we can fill a second dump truck. I was down there the other day looking at it. So
Thank you, Gary.
thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Gary,
Gary.
before you go through you, Mr. Chairman. Gary, who owns those yellow stakes on those chains out there,
Yellow stakes on the
on
chains.
moorings?
I
Are
believe it's...
those yours?
No, they're not. That's one of the mooring service providers. One of the private contractors that they do winterizations on the moorings.
Yeah.
They put out the winter stakes.
You're gonna-
Submerged.
when are they going to switch those over, do you know?
June 1st is the deadline. They have to be off. So some of them,
They don't float that great.
they're a difficult setup. They've got a couple other applications that would work much better. But
Thanks.
no problem. That's it. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Take care.
Mr. Chairman, if I could continue, on March 28th, I attended a meeting along with Director Burke and Selectman Holmes at the Cup of the Bay to talk about the so-called proposal to move a treatment center into a residential neighborhood. I made it very clear that evening that I do not support that. This is a residential zone, and unless there's some treatment given to it, it would need to require a site plan review by the Planning Board and/or the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I'll keep the board posted on this. I know we all got a lot of calls and emails on this matter. Item B, Mr. Chairman, in your packet you should have, I did provide a update from the State Ethics Commission with regards to new rules and regulations for public employees. This includes gifts to public employees, exemptions, and other items unrelated to gifts. On the 30th of March, I had Attorney Richard Bowen provide the entire leadership team with an update on these new regulations, and the leadership team asked good questions, and we're moving forward to adhere to the new policies provided by the State Ethics Commission. On item D, I want to let you know, and I know Guy is here, we are 100% complete on the emergency repairs to the Onset Stonebridge sewer line. For, Guy, correct me if I'm wrong, $138,000? $136,000, thank you. To bring that new line on and to effectuate that emergency repair, I want to thank the entire board for their assistance, and they did some additional work with railings and other parts of the Stonebridge to update it. I also toured it with Chairman Cruz, at least a couple times that I recall. We have a new street sweeping program on item E, Mr. Chairman. I won't go through the entire list, but since mid-March, we have been out with equipment on from Onset from 1st Street to 9th Street, West Boulevard, Longwood Avenue, West Central, Sunset Boulevard, Pleasant Avenue, Prospect Avenue, Highland Avenue, East Central, 10th Street, 11th, C.W. Bishop Avenue, Centennial Place, Woburn Place, Woburn Avenue, East Boulevard, Highland Avenue, Union Street, C.W. Bishop Parking Lot, Charge Pond Road, and then return back to Onset. We'll keep you posted on this. This is a valuable and I think significant program for the town. On item F, we received notification from the Governor's office, and I'm pleased to let you know that, and I believe there's a separate local aid resolution going through the legislature as we speak with regards to our Chapter 90 funds, just for the edification of everybody here and listening. These are funds that we spend on the roadways, road surfaces, providing the town with additional transportation improvements. And our transportation improvement is pegged to go up about 29% for Chapter 90 funds this year. Hopefully the legislature will move swiftly. I've been in touch with both Senator Pacheco's office and Representative Gifford's office on this, and we were getting something in the vicinity of in the mid-$500,000 range, and we're pegged to get for fiscal 2012 $735,128, Mr. Chairman. No update on Cranberry Commons. I know he's been working with the building department on his property, as we heard from most recently, on the chief of police. I know you all have been waiting for this. I'd like to report to the board that I have a tentative agreement with the chief, and that agreement encompasses, I think, the best possible planning going forward for a department that's growing, that has been through a number of stages in its development. I believe Chief Stanley is the right person for the job, and I'd like the sense of the board as to
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that that this board appoint Chief Stanley as the permanent full-time police chief for the town of Wareham.
Okay, before we do on that motion, he was explaining, I didn't even think that he had finished yet. So, would you continue?
I'll second that
once he
motion.
continues?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like a sense of the board. I think it's important that the board get behind all of our department heads. From the beginning of my tenure here, I've asked many of you to join me in reviewing applicants for jobs. In this particular case, I can say to you without a doubt, we have an outstanding chief. The money's in the budget. Let's move forward. Let's make this happen from a standpoint that let's move our public safety programs forward. And I think Chief Stanley is the person to do that. I make that recommendation to you, and I'm looking for some sense of the board to tell me what you think.
Mr. Snyder?
There's a motion on the floor, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion made in second. Is there any discussion? Poland, is there any discussion?
Well, Madam Chair, where's Jay? What is the town administrator saying? He doesn't hold the board. He's either hired the man or he hasn't.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Holmes, I take what the town administrator has said as he's appointing the chief of police.
Well, I'd like to hear him say that. That's his job, Mike. Mr. Schneider.
I'm appointing the chief of police.
And through you, Mr. Chair, what is your salary range, Mr. Town Administrator?
Mr. Chairman, there's no range. There's a number on a document.
Well, what's the number, Mr. Andrews?
$166,000.
Is that the base pay?
No, the base pay is $130,000, and his payment under the Quinn bill, a state law, is an additional $36,000. And there's no, let me make this absolutely clear for the listening audience, there's no other. I've heard about perks, I've heard about housing allowances, I've heard about transportation. This is about the man coming and doing the job that he has been doing for almost 2 years, and making certain that we can get him here for what I believe to be a reasonable amount of money. It's a contract that calls for, once again, the upper limit is $166,000.
Quiet down or we'll have to dismiss the whole audience. No more applause or anything from here on in. Thank you. Until it's over with. Any other questions from the board? Any remarks? No remarks. Well,
I'll remark further. I don't believe we have the money. I've asked to see where the money's coming from for the last 2 weeks. I've gotten no answers. The police budget for overtime has already been spent through the first week of March, according to the town's numbers. I'm not making this up. Here's Mr. Andrews' documents right here. So I'd like to know where all this money is going to come from.
Mr.
through
Chairman,
you to the town administrator, since he has all this money.
this is in the
Where
wages.
is it coming from?
This is in the wages and salaries line, so the overtime line for this fiscal year is about overtime. The chief will not be receiving any overtime.
He what?
He will not be receiving any overtime. He will be on the contract.
I'm not talking about the chief, I'm talking about this line item in the police department's overtime budget, which ran out of money midway through the first week of March.
Mr. Chairman, with,
April, so that's March, April, May, June. If you took the lowest month, it's another $170,000. Where's that money coming
Mr.
from?
Chairman, the police department, through you to the member, will balance its budget this fiscal year like it did last year.
I'd like to see that,
Well,
Mr. Andrews.
That's part of the process as we
Well,
wind
you're not going
down.
to get my support until you can show me where the money's going to come from.
It's in the 2012 budget, Mr. Chairman. I can show you the line.
Well,
Well, I'll make a few comments. I have been checking the overtime, and it has been excessive. I've talked to the chief, and he's got a plan in place to try to relieve it. So far, he has it, and I've been talking to them since last year. We've hired five more, five more police officers, which should reduce it. And then once he's on board, he even reconfirmed that he's going to look into it further. I know for the police officers, they may not like it, but we need to get our budget, because we're all in this together. One town, one unit. And we need to work together to get the budget down. I know it's dollars in your pocket, but it's dollars out of a lot of taxpayers. There's 40,000 people here in the summertime, 20,000 regular. So we need to keep this town going in the direction that it's going now. It may seem like a lot of money, because I had a limit too for the police. Because I've been out in the private force, usually I go by a 10% increase. But if you look around on the budget, who else makes that much money in the town of Wareham? So he's comparable with the next person that's making that much money, plus he's working 24/7, 365 days a year. The police officers work all year round. So we need to find the money somewhere, and it's in there. So, and he works the budget, not I. We just look at it. Now, in that contract, if he can put something in it that we got to work on that budget, on the overtime, I'm happy with it. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Chair, essentially what you're saying is you're willing to hire the chief of police at much more money than the old one if he cuts the overtime off the backs of those guys. And then I know why they're standing there. I don't think it's funny. You know, personal threats and everything else that's gone on with this over the last few weeks is really sickening here in Wareham. I got a mic. You're right. From some of those guys standing right there. So I'm not too thrilled about this, and I think this is insane. For a guy to come in here, you pull his weight around, and there's all this money. Where is this money going to come from? Listen, I didn't get elected to be reelected. I got elected to do the job here. Where is the money? We don't have the money. And there are many other issues Mr. Andrews should answer tonight regards to money.
Mr. Cruz,
Where is
if I
the
may.
money? Where is the money for this? So you're going to put into the guy's contract that he cuts the overtime to cut himself a sweet deal. That's not right, Mr. Cruz. So I don't believe that's right. These men have been working, men and women have been working for 4 years without a contract. Where is their contract?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I don't mean to interrupt.
Excuse me.
Where is their contract? Where is their last raise?
That's a matter for executive session.
Oh, we're doing one at a time.
No, it's not.
I think
No,
Mr.
it's
Holmes
not.
has the floor.
No, it is not. Where is it? 4 years.
Mr.
The guy,
Chairman,
this chief's been
Mr.
here a
Chairman.
year and a half. Why didn't he work on that for these men and help these men and women out? There's a problem here.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr.
Mr.
Holmes,
Snyder,
I find your comments very inappropriate.
Well, that's okay,
Number one,
Mr. Schneider.
Mr.
That's
Mr. Holmes,
okay.
I have the floor, sir.
That's okay.
Number two,
Another I have the floor.
Number two, the town administrator has already explained why we incurred the overtime expenses that we had.
He has?
We were down officers.
I didn't hear that.
I heard that very
Oh.
clearly.
Well, see, that's why we shouldn't switch seats.
excuse me, Mr. Holmes. He has the floor, one person at a time.
Okay.
Thank you. Good, Mr. Snyder.
Mr. Cruz, I would like to call for a vote.
Motion made, discussion made. Motion on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No.
3-1-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, point of order, please. I believe through the town charter, has the board been informed in writing of this appointment?
Well, now that he's made it, we have 15 days.
Once you've been informed in writing.
Right. Once so he has to,
Also, I believe the charter says majority of the full board, so the full board has to be present on the vote, I believe.
well, the other
Chair-
selectmen will be back on Tuesday, and when we get the written notice, we can go over it again.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Well, what did you just vote on?
if I could,
Mr. Schneider just made a motion, Mr. Chairman, to hire the chief of police.
He made
That's correct.
That's what
a motion for
He's
consensus
sitting
of the
right
board.
there. No, he did not.
Mr. Chairman,
I know
if
what
I
you-
could
I
straighten
know.
this out so that we're all on the same page for everybody listening. This is a civil service transfer, a chief of police in one town to another town. I need the consensus of the board, and I have legal opinion that says that the civil service process takes precedent. So I will sign the agreement tomorrow morning. I will get the paperwork from the State Department of Human Resources, and I'll bring back the contract for this board to place on file. That's the end of the process, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrews. Next.
Could continue, Mr. Chairman. We are working with the Boys and Girls Club, Barbara Sullivan, on the model recreation program, and I'm looking for her guidance through this program. And it was with the town of Dartmouth. The fellow there may or may not be able to help us out. I'll keep you posted on it. The business certificates with regards to Mary Ann Silver and Miles Burke are working on to ensure compliance with making certain that businesses understand that they have responsibility and processing those certificates and keeping them current on file. The Land Donation Review Task Force is working with the bank to find out whether the donation can be made possible with regards to an environmental analysis that would be forthcoming. Mr. Chairman, on the governor's budget, you all have in front of you, I do have a work paper that is supplemented from the one I provided you last Thursday. I don't need a vote. I'm just looking for your consideration and review. But it pretty much outlines the agreement, what we have through the Budget Review Committee and the school district. And just for the further illustration to all involved, you can see on the second page, it wraps up and it shows clearly the school portion of the budget, which is their contribution at $1.7 million, and the town's portion of the budget at $1.156 million. And I think that shows good partnership in working forward to forge an agreement that we can bring to town meeting floor and to cover the gap in the school budget as well as the town budget. And we did, once again, provide this to you last Thursday. I'm just looking to place it on file. If you have any questions on it, I'm happy to answer them. On the deacon safety issues, I know Mr. Gifford, I don't have a direct update, but we're working on the crosswalks and signalization, lighting, better signalization in and around the Deacon School, and I'll have a better update for you next week. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrews. Okay, continue on.
Are we taking questions on the town administrator's report tonight, Mr. Chairman?
Any questions?
I do.
Okay.
Are we allowed?
Well, I think we can, excuse me.
Well, I'll ask my first question through you, Mr. Chair, to the town administrator. I'd like to
Mr.
know
Holt.
what your plan
Mr. Holt.
is. What?
Let's go through the town business, and then when it says other business, we'll go back to the
Well, I
question.
think should be part of his report, ongoing issues and projects. If you want to wait, it's up to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Town business?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that this just requires signature from the board. Should be a document.
On the town business, first one's approve the release deed from the AD Bakeries.
Yes. There should be a document in the bin that covers, it's just a signing of it. Maybe the clerk and I can go over this right after the meeting, or there's no vote required here, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the next is a discussion of 13 Arnold Street.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, through you to the members, this is an item that is being worked on between Attorney Perry and Attorney Bowen. As you recall, it was regarding, is Mr. Campina still here? Yes. Mr. Perry's here, okay.
Yeah, I'm here only because I got a security about 3 meetings.
Well,
we want to talk about this tonight. I hadn't talked with Attorney Bowen yet. I hadn't really heard from anybody since I delivered the package to you a couple of weeks ago.
I have provided that package through you, Mr. Chairman, to Attorney Bowen to review it with Mr. Gifford and Mr. Campina.
Fair enough.
So that's where we stand right now, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from Attorney Bowen.
That's fair enough. That's what I kind of assumed. Okay, good enough. Thank you very much.
I recommend we table this matter, Mr. Chairman.
Will do. Thank you very much. Discussion of community preservation, the Swiss Beach property.
Steve has let's get a chair for Shelby.
Excuse me, is this community preservation? All
Yes.
members on the board?
Yeah, well, no.
Okay, so this is community preservation.
No.
Sherby and I are community preservation. But we're here to discuss the Swifts Beach conservation restriction. Okay. I apologize for not being here last week. It was miscommunication. I was told at 3:30 that it had been postponed till this week, and it was just confusion. So what we wanted to do is bring you up to speed as to where we are on this project. In November, members of the Swifts Beach Improvement Association came before CPC and asked if they could pursue holding a conservation restriction on the 5.5 acre parcel out at Swifts Beach. We told them at that time that they would need to set up, according to a small land trust, and that we actually had no issues with it. We thought that would be great because local oversight is much better than having another entity somewhere else. Besides, as everybody knows, we've had trouble finding a holder for a conservation restriction on that parcel. And the law requires that when CPC funds are used, that there be a restriction on the property. So last week you got a copy of a conservation restriction, which is actually a little bit too soon. Council can look at it, but it hasn't been vetted by CONCON yet, and until the group finishes organizing as a land trust, the state will not review the conservation restriction. So it's a little bit of a cart before the horse kind of a situation right now. We're hoping that within the next 3 months we would have a land trust, a small land trust with the Swifts Beach Improvement Association. And the other, I've received some phone calls from folks concerned about whether or not this neighborhood group had the knowledge to hold a CR, the reviews that are required by the state on a yearly basis. And I found out last night from Conservation in Boston that because they are a local land trust, they could actually partner with Conservation, and the two could hold the CR on the Swifts Beach property. So we're going to pursue that, because that will alleviate anyone's worry about whether or not it would be monitored appropriately. So I think, do we need anything else? I think that's where we're at. I just gave you copies of the email from the state, from Irene Del Bono at the state level, explaining that this is doable. It's a big surprise. We didn't know that that was a possibility. But with Conservation coming on board, they don't know it yet, but they're coming on board. And with that happening, it alleviates any problems that people might have. So if you have any questions.
Board have any questions? Mr. Snyder?
Yes. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear from the Swiss Beach Association, since they're here. But I'd also like to ask the question. This email is from...
The first email is from me to Irene Del Bono at Conservation in Boston, and then it's subsequent emails back and forth between us last evening, actually. And that's when she mentioned that normally you cannot have a town entity hold a restriction on property that the town owns, but because we're bringing in another land trust, you'll see in the emails, it changes the dynamics, and therefore they can partner with this small land trust. And the way I see this being set up is it will be, it won't have like the Wildlands Trust or the Wareham Land Trust, which are much bigger organizations. This will be more confined to just the property that abuts the neighborhood.
Okay, so I'm looking at a letter that you sent to the letter that you sent to Mr. Andrews. There's no date on it, unfortunately.
It was last Monday.
Last Monday. That says that basically you've asked Dave to check with the DOR, and if there was a possibility that the requirement from CPA law requiring a CR on the property purchase could possibly be waived.
Actually, he did. He checked with Conservation, because we have run into such an issue finding a holder for the conservation restriction. They did say that if we could prove our point that we have been working diligently to find a holder and was unable to do so, that they would consider waiving that. But quite frankly, if you want to protect the property, the best way to do that is through a conservation restriction. And when the Swifts Beach, miscommunication there, because they had not come back to our meeting, and so we assumed that they had changed their mind. We didn't realize that they were going down a different route at that point.
Okay. I just have to say that, because of the Swiss Beach issue has gone on for so long, I was very concerned about this when I read it.
Believe me, yeah.
And I don't believe that there is a waiver. I don't believe that there is a waiver.
No, DCR said that there would be a possibility. Okay. Not that they would like to do a waiver, but if we could not find anyone, but I think we found someone. So I don't think that's an issue any longer.
So there was never any formal letter sent to DOR?
No, I believe Dave Pichette just talked to them.
Okay. Yeah, because, as I said, I looked at Mass, I was very concerned about this, so I looked up Mass General Law, Chapter 44, which basically states a real property interest that is purchased with monies from the Community Preservation Fund shall be bound by a permanent deed restriction that meets the requirements of Chapter 184, limiting the use of the interest to the purpose for which it was acquired.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
That's why we've been going from one holder to another, trying to get this done.
in your belief, is the Swiss Beach Association?
Yes, we're going to be working together to make sure that they are a viable land trust, that the state, in the new document that you just got, Irene Del Bono gave us some new groups that we need to contact in order to get this going, and once that's all set, the state will accept them, I guarantee it.
Okay. I noticed that there was a 4-month period between the time,
Yeah, that was
Okay.
the miscommunication.
Okay. Yeah, and to me, that doesn't seem like a significant amount of time, but I guess my question to you is there a way that we can put a date certain on this?
Is there a date certain?
Is there a way that we can put a date certain?
No, we're hoping for within the next 3 months to get this wrapped up, but the state is overwhelmed with all kinds of things, so I couldn't say specifically it'll be done by June 1st. We'd like it to be done before the end of the summer, certainly.
Point of order, there are some taking pictures of people's faces, and I don't feel comfortable.
I think it's legal for him to do it as long as, if he's, yes, it is. If he's taking the private individuals, he needs to have permission.
Mr. Chairman, could you clarify what you just said, please?
Yes.
Would you mind clarifying what you just said?
Right. In other words, in any public meeting, open meeting, you can take pictures or tape. With permission, you got to get permission from the board. In open meeting, you can take pictures or tape. You can out there if you get permission from the board. And if you take pictures of any public other than us up here, you have to get permission from the person. He can't just go into the audience and take pictures. Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, hold it.
No, he hasn't.
Time out. This is a public meeting. You see pictures of public meetings all the time in the newspapers. They don't go around and get permission to everybody in the audience to take a picture of the audience. And you don't need to, we shouldn't be discussing with audience members, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order. We're ending it right now. He's leaving, so that's the end of the subject.
No, well, we should address it, though, Mr. Chairman, because
Okay,
this
go ahead.
is a public
Go ahead,
meeting.
Mr. Holmes. It is a public meeting. Address it.
It's a public meeting.
Okay, it's
This
addressed.
meeting's on TV. So anybody in here can take pictures with their cell phones, cameras. This is a public meeting.
Mr. Chairman, through you.
They don't need permission to
Mr.
take
Chairman.
pictures at a public meeting.
Excuse me.
He deserves the same respect that every other board chairman has had. So I demand respect for my husband. I'm sick of this.
Excuse me. Right.
Hey, listen.
Mr. Holmes,
I can ask the chairman a question if I'd like. I am a member of this board.
Mr. Snyder has the floor. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Holmes, I believe that the law states that with the prior permission of the chairman of the board, and that a person may take pictures, but it must be from a fixed location, and if it does not cause a disruption to the meeting.
Mr. Schneider, I know that when you have a video, even people at the table have a chance to move around the table, correct? The man sitting in the back of the room, he's not disturbing anybody. He wasn't up here in the front, walking around here taking pictures. He took one picture from the back row. Who could he have possibly been disturbing? If it wasn't Bill Whitehouse, and if it was you and me sitting there, and we took a picture with our cell phone, nobody would have said anything, right? Would you agree?
Mr. Holmes, the point is that there is a specific law related to this issue. Someone raised the issue, and the chairman has addressed the issue.
Continue with the business at hand.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
I'm sorry, Nate, you all through?
I'm done.
And I believe Mr. Snyder invited comment from, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to respond to some of the things that we've just discussed.
Yes, I'd like to, through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear from the Swiss Beach Association, if that's all right.
Okay, Mr. Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just had the opportunity ourselves to, to review this email and discussion and in just a couple of minutes to absorb it. But I believe I understand the gist of what the recommendation is here by the state, who is a competent person who is reviewing this from a distance, a third party with no axe to grind here. So I think we can take this recommendation and advice as good advice from a disinterested meaning locally, a disinterested party. The relevant law that is being discussed, yes, 44 is the relevant law, but so is Chapter 184, Section 32. And that chapter has been specifically adopted by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs and has been incorporated within the Conservation Handbook, which has been what we have been relying on all along to develop this conservation restriction. We used the language that was given to us by CPC for specific in various drafts, all of which were drafted by Copeland and Page, Town Council at the time. So we relied heavily on that language, and that's essentially what we use. The language that's relevant is in the handbook states that in fact, it doesn't talk about the DOR, but the DOR certainly can, by law, in fact, grant a waiver. But it's not, that's irrelevant, and that's the problem. Because according to 184 Section 32, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, no restriction that has been purchased with state funds shall be released, and funds so received shall revert to the fund sources from which the original purchase was made. That would, of course, be reverting back to the CPC. The problem, of course, is even if the DOR granted such a waiver, the DOR cannot supersede Mass General Law, neither can we, the town of Wareham, neither can, with all due respect, the CPC, the CONCOM, or the State Environmental Office. This is Massachusetts General Law, and anybody could challenge the status of this CR by simply stating that the funds were used, there is a CR, but it's not placed with any holder, and therefore, technically, the CR doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, the money is due back to the CPC. If the money is due back to the CPC, the only way the town will find that money is eventually to sell that land to a developer. So this is far more of an important issue than just whether there's an adequate holder. We certainly can be an adequate holder. We'll be happy to adopt the language that's being recommended and advised to us by both the CPC and the state. We can incorporate that into our document. We can, I understand legal counsel has reviewed the CR and has no objection to its substantive content, which is great, but does object, or has recommendations, I should say, to add some language relating to a successor trustee. And that's just standard contract language, and that's perfectly acceptable. And then there is some formatting issues, but that's essentially my understanding of Council's review of the document. So Council has done what Mr. Holmes specifically asked for last meeting, and Mr. Holmes is completely correct that this needs to be vetted both by Town Council, by the State's Council, so that when, not if, but when there is a legal challenge to this, then all parties have essentially exercised their responsibility in drafting a competent document that the town can stand behind. We also understand that CPC will work with us closely. We want that assistance. We'll accept any help we can get with them, and then they will assist us in working with the Conservation Commission and the agent in terms of applying for the specific application that would be the document that would be sent to the state, along with our CR, along with Council's comments, along with our proof that we are a legal organization. I believe that our preamble and some of the Mass Land Organization information that's incorporated in this email will assist us in drafting that further if we need to as an organization. And so with CPC, the conservation, town council's assistance, I think we can all agree on a working document that will protect that land in perpetuity. It will be owned and continue to be owned by the town of Wareham for the purpose of a public beach. And that's what it was for, and that's what it will be operated as once our association has the responsibility of that restriction in place. So the time frame, I would hope we could do it faster, and we'll certainly work faster to get it done. I know we'll be pushing hard, but that's acceptable with us if it's acceptable to the Board of Selectmen.
Any other questions for the board?
I guess through you, Mr. Chairman, to the board, you know, I personally think that this issue could be addressed tonight. I think that if we incorporate the language, I've read the language, as I'm sure most of you have, from the attorneys in relation to this issue. I think
Mr.
if we're...
Schneider, may I interrupt, please? The CR is not been vetted by conservation or anyone, so you can't, at this point, put your approval on it, because it's going to change, guaranteed. The other issue is, until the state approves the Swifts Beach Improvement Association / Land Trust as the holder, they will not even review the document. So we're moving too fast on this. We have to get A done before we go to C. All right? So the first thing that has to be done is they have to become a viable land trust that the state will allow to hold a conservation restriction.
Ms. Miller, if I may, I think that we've already received the opinion from council on that issue and an email, and I believe that they're acceptable to, we have an opinion of council that they're acceptable.
Well, as the council noted, good. How are you? As council noted that we should wait on it until, it's just like Ms. Ann Miller said, Nan Miller, that we should wait on it until it's all. The meeting, the vote that we had last week was to have the lawyers look at it, and we did. If you recall, the first motion was not even to accept it by the board that was here. It was 2-3. So I think you're having a gift just by having them wait and go over it.
Yeah, we will certainly see that it comes back to the board once it's been vetted by conservation and once the state reviews it and receives it. So.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may just briefly respond to Mr. Snyder's point, he is technically correct, but the only change that is going to happen, as I understand this email, as I read it, is that we will jointly hold the conservation restriction with the Concom now, as opposed to just solely holding the conservation restriction. And apparently, we've gotten that imprimatur from the state based on, their understanding of the law, and that certainly adds a lot of value to us as the holder. But to go to Mr. Snyder's point, he's perfectly correct, because the handbook, the environmental handbook, states that to determine if a charitable organization is a suitable holder of a CR, the Secretary may review the language in its charter or articles of incorporation and bylaws. It must be carried out for the benefit of the public at large. Certainly a public beach is a public interest benefit. It must also meet the requirements of, again, Mass General Law 184, Section 32, which is that the CR must be held by either a government agency or by a charitable corporation whose purpose includes conservation of land or water areas. We've satisfied the two prongs legally of that test. However, if we're going to expand the relationship so that conservation will hold the CR along with us and assist us, we would be grateful to engage in that kind of relationship. And for that reason, I believe as an association, we would be happy to go this route. Not because we're not qualified as a holder, we are. We've met the prongs. So that's why I would suggest that We will work with CPC, Concom, both town council and the state's council ultimately in drafting the best bulletproof document we can, because ultimately I think that's where Mr. Holmes was heading with this in the first place.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Savageau, and I'd just like to say I appreciate the fact that you folks are all working together to get this done.
I am
really
so
important.
sick to death of Swift speech.
Oh, thank
I
you.
just want it out of there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I didn't know where it was even. I'm an Onset girl. Nobody goes to Swift Speech if you're from Onset, so it's like, I didn't know, but.
Well, I've walked the beach several times.
Some do. Some do.
Okay, not me.
Mr. Chairman, that's all that we had on this matter. I don't know if
Mr. Holmes, you have
there are any...
No, Mr. Chair, through you, I was just going to recommend that, I think it was the third email or fourth email from Mr. Schneider, that they were, oh, I can't use it anymore, that's right there, that the guy was out of the office. He was going back to the land lawyer and was going to get some language to send back to us, and I was going to make a recommendation that we send that to Mrs. Miller.
If you would.
And because there were some other issues with the document, Bruce, not from Bowen, but from the third guy, the land guy. And he was going to make some written recommendations, but he wasn't in the office today or tomorrow. So if we could get that to Mrs. Miller, and then she can sit down with the two groups and go through that document.
Do you think you could forward that to us as well, and so we could get started?
Well, I don't think, we didn't ask him to rewrite it. We just asked him to review it. So he'll give you his comments on what.
Certainly. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, we couldn't recommend that he rewrite it for you, because then we'd have to do that for every group, and it'd be a problem.
Understood.
No.
Right.
All right. You all set?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah. Done?
Oh, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
thank you very much.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, on the next item, if I could present this, there's a surplus piece of property. You're going to be receiving a number of certifications from departments on surplus property. A classic example is if you review the auditorium balcony, you will not see a ton of junk in the balcony area. So part of our sprucing up, if you will. But this was a request, actually a certification by Mr. Gifford, the Director of Municipal Maintenance, to surplus, or ask the board to surplus a small passenger bus, vehicle number 33, which would be available for disposition, of which I've asked for guidance from our attorneys to make sure that we follow the appropriate disposition process. But it's a question of whether the board would like to take an action to surplus this matter. I recommend such action to you.
Is there any motion from the floor?
I have a question.
Sure.
What's the value of this van?
I'm told that it's between $500 and $1,000. I believe it's on the shorter side of that because it's been in kind of non-use status for quite some time.
For clarification, Mr. Andrews,
Sure.
through you, Mr. Chair, what is the maximum value before something has to go out to bid when we have surplus items?
It's an excellent question, and in working with council, we have certain bylaws that restrict the disposition of property. I believe it's $500, and then otherwise you have to get a valuation of it. So I intend to get valuation of it, determination of its full value before we do anything. The first step in the process was to declare it surplus to begin that process. But the state disposition laws are a little bit different and a little bit higher. I believe it's $5,000. So we lag behind, if you will, or however you want to put it. We have a little bit stricter set of circumstances. So once it's declared surplus, I intend to work with the attorney to see if we could get it to that point. And we could put it out to surplus warrant and have anybody take a look at it for a bid that meets at least the minimum value.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board? Is there a motion to consider this?
Just surplus. How about
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to surplus the VN to WCTV.
How about just surplus?
Excuse me. Yeah, motion's been made. Now it's the surplus. It's just the okay to surplus. Because we still need to check on the viable parts of this.
You just made a recommendation, so you want to table it until we have all the answers?
I'll second it for further discussion.
First, second for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Holmes, I appreciate the motion to surplus the vehicle and then let the local and state bidding procurement procedures take place.
So you're saying to make a motion to surplus without designating WCP?
At this point, yes.
CT, okay.
Do you want to amend your motion, Mr.
Want to
Holmes?
withdraw?
Yeah, Mike has to withdraw a second.
I'll withdraw my second.
I make a motion just to surplus the vehicle.
Second.
Motion made and second. Is there no more discussion?
I just have a comment. I mean, if I may, Mr. Chair. I think that this is a good idea, especially, attempting to work with nonprofits, but I think, we want to make sure that there is a process that is followed from my standpoint, and I also want to make sure that, we have in fact checked with all of the departments in town to make sure that they don't have a use for this vehicle. Because I really don't get that from this letter necessarily.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, through you to Member Schneider, that's exactly the process by which I would like to go about my business, which is to have a departmental checkoff to make sure that nobody has any interest in it once it's declared surplus, so it can go from the municipal maintenance garage to an appropriate town department. That would be a limited number, in my opinion, but I still think that that process has to be fully followed, and we intend to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Motion made and second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? 4-0-0. Now, Mr. Holmes, any other town business?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have a few questions. Since we seem to have a bunch of money, I'd like to ask through through you to Mr. Andrews a couple of questions. I'd like to know, I took a day off about 5 weeks ago from work to do some interviews for a pretty important position in town, namely the Director of Assessing. And here we sit on April the 12th with nothing has happened for the most part, nothing substantial. We had to move the Article 4 for the 150 grand to May, the end of May, to do the research. I mean, the assessor's office at this point in time is in grave danger here of not being able to set a permanent solid tax rate for FY12 in January. At the schedule we have right now and the timeline required to do the 100% recertification, get the vendor in here, wait till the end of May to get the money. We have no director, we have no manager in that department. I'd like to know what the town administrator's plan is to make sure that that all happens so that we can have a real tax bill in January, because the repercussions to this town of having an estimated tax bill in January are very serious matters. So I'd like to know how you get us there without having to do that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, on a number of fronts. We have interviews scheduled for my office with the 3 finalists for this Thursday. I have spoken with 2 of the finalists, and they're enthusiastically coming to the next round of interviews. I want to thank the interview committee, which was made up of Member Holmes and a number of the key departments that work with the Director of Assessment. I just wanted to note for the record that we have an acting director, Barbara LaFavor, who is the acting director, appointed her upon the departure of the previous director. The interview process, I heard, went very well. I have looked at all of the rating sheets and all of the background information. I know that the assessors were represented by the chairman, who I spoke with this evening, and I asked him to parallel me with this process to be able to select the most appropriate candidate. I have signed the vision contract for the $152,000 with the caveat that it needed to go to town meeting for appropriation, which is standard procedure. So I don't see, I also spoke, before I forget, at the assessors seminar that was held at Wareham Town Hall Auditorium, I might add, that we had over 50 assessors throughout the region that came and participated in an upgrade of their knowledge and skills. And I spoke with our regional representative from the Department of Revenue, who is well aware of this plan and has endorsed it from a standpoint that she feels very strongly that we are moving on the right track. So hopefully we'll be able to get qualified candidate on the next agenda, which is my goal, Member Holmes. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Yeah, well, just to follow that up, it's a nice talk, but it's a 6-month process according to the company that's going to come in and do this work. They had us scheduled to begin this process, I believe, the end of May, beginning of June. With the issues around the money and putting now town meeting being held off until May 23rd, maybe, you know, that company obviously isn't sitting around waiting for us to schedule this project. That's when it was supposed to start. We do not have a director of assessing in that office, and we do not have a manager in that office. It's a 6-month process, and in order to get this stuff finalized, to get state approval for that tax rate, all this paperwork needs to be done before December 1st. So when you back up 6 months, we have a problem. Would you not agree that we have a problem there, Mr. Andrews?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe we have a problem, and I've talked with Patrick Donovan, who's a principal at Vision. He doesn't believe we have a problem with the contract. The contract had to be conditioned through you, Mr. Chairman, with the caveat that we needed the appropriation from town meeting, at town meeting. I've also worked with former assessment director Richie Gonzalez, who has been on board and assisting in this process. I don't believe he thinks that we have a problem. And I'm happy to, if you'd like to stop by the office tomorrow morning, we'll reach out to the Department of Revenue together.
No, I don't think I need to do that. If you would just, I would make a motion to the board then at this point that we add to his, Mr. TA's report, ongoing issues. I'd like to have an assessor update on here so we can stay on top of this every week.
Mr. Chairman, I'll put this on for the next meeting, but the town administrator's report is the town administrator's report. Thank you.
And I'm not allowed to request something on that report?
I'm saying that it's going to go on.
I'm the one who requested the report. I mean, Jesus, you can't...
Let's hold it down. Let's be civil.
I'm being civil, Mr. Cruz. I'm asking a question. I want to be able to track this. This is important.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Holmes, I agree with you, Mr. Holmes, that this is an important item. I don't think that, and I'm not sure, but I don't think that it requires a motion. And I think all of us sitting at this table will make sure that, I'm sure Mark will keep it on his, the town administrator will keep it on his, will add it to his report for the next, so.
It'd be a lot easier if I didn't have to ask every week if it was on the ongoing projects. I think it's an important one.
I agree. And I have
our tax rate is very important in setting out a regular bill as opposed to an estimated bill is important. And just one other question, because apparently the budget's perfect and the police are now perfect. I had some scuttlebutt here on the Department of Environmental Protection. I'm wondering what the status is. I see Mr. Buckminster hired. I was sat in on those interviews as well. I see that he appointed his people or hired his people. I'm wondering what happened to the sewer plant employees that we approved in October at town meeting. Have they been hired at this point? Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I know one of the positions has been filled, and I know of no letter or whatever reference you're making with respect to the Mass DEP. We've been in touch with them on a regular basis through Mr. Gifford and Mr. Campina, who is here. And the plan is to get those positions filled. But I would also like to harken back to a previous plan where we had Woodard and Curran come before us and express a desire to get a software program to take the human capital out of this equation, of which we're paying pension costs for, we're paying health care costs for, and if we can get that software program up and running, I think we'll be more efficient in the long run, and that's my goal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, through you, Mr. Chairman, back to the town administrator, is Mr. Campina then saying that we don't need to fill these positions and we can move that money somewhere else? Is that the idea?
I don't think that's what I said, Mr. Chairman, if I could. I said that the town meeting did approve 3 positions
Right.
To be pretty much monitors in the process, and I'm interested in using software and technology to get there. If we can't do it within an acceptable timeline for this body, then we'll hire the employees and move from there.
So at this time, there's no plan to hire the employees?
1 out of the 3 we have brought on has been filled.
But the other 2 are not to be filled at this point?
I'm not saying that they're not going to be filled.
So they're not going to be filled at this point, you're going to wait to see if the software works, is that what I heard you say?
I believe, just correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this body asked for a report from Woodard & Curran to give us the guidance on moving to use the technology that we have or that can be upgraded within the pump stations to get the best possible software in place. And I know a number of the members of the board, including myself, have been very active in that effort. As Mr. Campina makes recommendations to me through Mr. Gifford, I will fill the positions.
Mr. Chairman, the same software that I got. Is Mr. Campina here? Mind if I ask him just a quick question?
I think the sewer is next on the agenda.
All right. Yeah, because that's all sewer related. I'll hold that until then. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
I'll
Chairman.
hold it until then.
You'll hold it to them? Any other town business? If not, we'll move into sewer. Mr. Campaigner, would you like to step forward? Just in case.
Good evening. Guy Campina, Sewer Department.
If you could, through the chairman, just give us an update on discussions that we've had, not only about the staff that you have, but about the longer-range goals that we've set for the department.
We've set a lot of goals, and a lot around personnel. We've talked about splitting shifts, which we're planning to do this week. Let me just say this. I recently got a call from DEP, and they're really wondering about hiring the 2 people. And they said that's the promise we made to them. I explained to Joe that we're looking at technology, we're looking at mission, we're looking at multi-trode, and we're also looking at skater as it is. In his opinion, we still need 2 people. We're planning on hiring 5. We're going to cut that down to 2. His opinion is still we need 2 people, and he is anxious to get that done. With skater, we'll still need him. It's not going to change. One of the reasons we're going to a split shift is to get better coverage on the weekends. What we're lacking is weekend coverage. The busiest time we have is weekends. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, our greatest flow. I've talked to Mr. Andrews about this extensively. We decided that the best thing for the town was to take those hours and put people full-time. And we're going to do that. The other part of the equation that Mr. Shepard and Joy Hilton from the EPA are adamant about is I&I, our program. And I assured him that with the split shift, that we'd be able to concentrate Friday, Monday, and Tuesday on I&I issues, which ties into the CMOM, which is coming down at us also. So we're excited about that. But nonetheless, we're still going to need 2 people. There's no getting around it. There's no getting around it. We're down 5. Skate will get us 3, and we need 2. And how I came to that number through the DEP, through Tom Biankowitz, is that they sent me a doc that's drawn up originally by the DEP training school that gives you a grading system. And what they do is they grade what your procedures are. We are an extended aerated plant with nitrogen, or basically nutrient removal, BNR. That puts us into a category of 8 people at the plant, and then they factor in the pump stations. We have 46 of them right now, which is unheard of. It's quite a bit, and that's what puts us in the higher bracket because we have a tremendous amount of pump stations. I met today with the people from Mission, Hayes Pump, and we're going to go out Thursday. We're going to spend the entire day in jeans and dirty clothes going through these pump stations and trying to get Skater updated. We already have a mission system. What really troubles me is that we have a system we paid money for and not utilizing it to its fullest potential. We've ignored it. And we're going to bring it to its full potential. And that's going to minimize the actual checking time. But nonetheless, we still need to check it. We still need personnel. This is all part of our long-term plan. And Mr. Andrews is correct. We do have a long-term plan. And we've presented this to EPA and DEP. But they're still hung up on two people because they're adamant about it. They're adamant. Monthly when I talk to Mr. Shepard, he's adamant. I've asked him for a meeting with himself, his boss, and they won't give us one. We've tried and I've tried and I've tried, and they say that the answer to them is going to be us fulfilling what they've asked us. I'm working on one of them, is that the status of all our pump stations. That's been an extensive job, a lot more than I ever thought it would be. We've got a bunch of pump stations that have a lot of major problems with them, and they want that they want a complete list. I've hired two people. Actually, I didn't hire them. I have two pump companies come forward, and they're making me booklets. They're right in the middle of it, and that's not complete. They've been on that since December. They've been at that. Just to give you some insight of what's out there. Our repairs are going to be extensive. So even with taking the daily check-in of the stations off the table, the cost, if I was to take all this work and contract it out, would be substantial. So therefore, the two people will be in, they'll get into actual, and I don't mean to be rude, I call it productive time, not windshield time. And I mean that in the nicest way, because production is what we need. It comes down to the quality for the quality dollar we're paying. Wareham pays quality dollars. We do a great job. We take care of our help, and I'm just asking for the same in return. So that's our focus, and that's where we're going with this whole process, and we're serious about it. I think one of the first things made clear to me when I came on board was to be accountable, to be responsible, and I've taken that commitment seriously. And I say this story, and I don't want to belabor it, but I think of that single old lady struggling to survive and trying to make a decision between paying me and eating. I owe her quite a bit. So this is all part of the big project. This Friday, we're going into that split shift. And trust me, it's not going to be easy. My help last Thursday told me there's not enough to go around, that we sat with their union rep and myself. They said they can't, we're tying in Parkwood. They say they can't check the stations. I'm doing them. My biofilters can't be done. I'm doing them. All right? I can go on and on and on. And they're saying to me that I've got them stretched thin already. It troubles me. I'll do whatever it takes. I mean that sincerely. I'm in the machine. I'm doing inspections. I'm all over the place because it's that important to me. So we do have good direction, and I mean that emphatically. And I think we can continue on, but I would like to tell this board tonight, and Mr. Andrews, we need two people, we really do. And I want to say this, that it's in the budget. I've taken my budget apart. And one thing I do with my budget, because I'm so petrified of being in a deficit, I mean, I literally wake up middle of the night in shivers, and I go over that budget weekly. I go over it, I go over it, I go over it. And to the point where I'm driving my staff crazy. Did you need that? Why'd you buy that? Could you get it cheaper? I mean, it's just the way it has to be. And so I've been over it, and I can take you right to the 31st of June, and I have the money. And the other part that troubles me, to put my heart on the table, is that when I split the shift, I have to make a tough decision. I've got to take some people with families that I'm going to take them off Monday through Friday and put them on Friday through Tuesday. And that's going to mean, and what the union's presented to me, is that it's a death sentence to a lot of people. If I hired into that slot, and the person that hires in and advertised that slot, it's not a death sentence to them because they knew what they would get into and they chose it. So, I mean, that troubles me because on one side, I'm obligated to the community, and I'm going to do this. I'm not stopping because it's the right thing to do. But I'm also troubled because I am playing with human lives and families. But bottom line is that the town has to benefit, and I'm going to do what I think is right, and that's what I'm going to do. But that's where I am, and just to be very, very blunt about things. I'm proud of my department. We had a tour today from School St. Margaret's in Bourne, 13, 14-year-old kids, really excited. You know, I get excited about those things. I want to make the plan a destination. People say, destination? Absolutely. What we do there is important. It needs to be a destination. So anyways, that's all part of our big-time plan, and we're going to succeed. So
That's a great destination.
that's where it
Mr.
is.
Chair,
I know.
Mr. Chair, if I could, just one question to Mr. Campini. Well, Guy, listen, I'll make a comment to you because I think you know that since you came here and moved into this slot, you know I have the utmost respect for you, and I think that I said it before and I'll say it again. I think you're a top-notch manager, and I think you're doing a great job there. But my question is about the software.
Yes.
Right, that software. I got these lines, right?
Yes.
Now, am I to just picture 164 of these? Is that a pump? Is that what that is?
That's a pump.
Station,
and
right?
the problem what you're having is there's not enough historical data to give you some good information. That's the problem, because we're only going to have it for 2 months. But I have another system, Mission, which we have, and that's why I was going with that. It troubles me. We spent good money. I'm going to cut a check this week for 15 grand. I'm not going to cut it personally. I'm going to authorize 15 grand for our mission.
Well, now listen, if you want to cut a check personally, go right ahead.
I can imagine. But 15 grand for the system that we're paying for. And we're not even using it to a beginning of its capacity. We paid $10,000 for a paperless office. We've got the hardware. We've got the scanners. We're not using it. And it troubles me. I'm saying, I'm looking at the money I'm spending that we've spent in the past, and I'm saying, you know, you got to maximize the dollars you have. So we're going to take the missions. I met with this guy, Mr. Knight. We're going to go Thursday. And the key to it all is that every one of our pump stations already have the mission. They all have them. And it's a software. They've upgraded. It can give us everything we need to get to for I'm thinking total expense, probably 60 grand.
Is that the software
No, you got a new
see, or
one.
it's a different one?
I've got a different one. I'll give you
Because
this.
Mrs. Begley might be able to understand that one. It looks like a big EKG thing.
It's 123mc.com. Go on that website and use my name, G. Campiner.
That's the one?
Yes, just
Right.
G. Camp. Oh, wow, tell everybody. Well, you can go on there and you can get in and see what it is. I'll give you the website.
I'll send you the link.
It's an incredible
link
thing.
out to the
It
board.
really is.
It's okay.
And I want to be emphatic. I'm not looking to put people out of work. What I'm saying is that here's my thing. With this software, I get updates of pump speed, pump runtime. I get information on amperage. And what that does for me, it helps me predict the problem. And so you can nip it at the bud, correct it before it becomes a problem. You can also see wear and tear on motors. Motors are very expensive, $30, $40, $50, $80,000 for motors. And so you can see the wear and tear on them. And when you see the wear and tear, I can make projections as far as maintenance, cleaning them. One of our biggest problems is rags. It sounds kind of corny, but people flush everything but what they're supposed to. And that gets into the pumps, and we got to derag them. For me to derag a pump is a half a day and 2 men. That's just the way it is. We also need macerators, and they're $36,000. I need 12 of them. I mean, so it goes on and on and on. So, you know, we need to really approach it, and that's why I say productive time, not windshield time. Productive time, we have to do it. So, yeah, 2 people would get us there, and I mean that sincerely, and it's not, if I didn't need it, trust me, I wouldn't even be mentioning it. And I mean that sincerely, because, again, the goal is, and I say this and I beat it to death, and I'll beat it again, I have that vision of that little old lady who struggles, and I mean that sincerely. That vision's in my head because I owe her like every other taxpayer. So that's why I'm saying that. Now, our goal is to minimize. And if you don't see me Monday morning, the weekend didn't go well, because it's going to be the first time of our split shift and no one's happy about it. So that's where we are with it.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Andrews?
You're welcome. Thanks.
Liaison reports? You have any? Okay.
I'm not a liaison yet.
Right.
Mr. Chair.
I'm just going to explain to the public. We'll be dealing out committees probably next week. If not next week, it'll be the week after. We did get together last Thursday when we had a meeting and informed everybody to go to as many as they can attend to and find out what times is appropriate for them, and let me know what's appropriate for you, so when we go over it, we can split it. I know one of them, Mr. Snyder, wants it, so we'll share it together. So, and you wanted
Board of Health.
Board of Health, so that's good, because Board of Health's been complaining, no one's been going to their meetings, and I think, and I'm not the liaison, but I only went a couple times when Mr. Campino was on and with the new.
Mr. Chair, can I have one? I'd like to make one every Friday, if I could. Liaison, and we can discuss ongoing problems as sewer commissioners until there's a change.
Well, what about on your weekly meeting, the bi-monthly meetings that you have for the sewer? We can use that as,
Absolutely, that'd be a great idea.
right,
Great idea.
because I know I try to attend most of it, Steve has been, but since it's a posted meeting, we can, and we're the commissioners, and that would be perfect.
Mr. Chair, if I could, liaison reports. I did attend the ad hoc meeting from Mrs. Ekstrom. Mr. Schneider came for Mrs. Winslow. And there'll be more about this in the public. I asked the superintendent how he planned to educate the town. But the bottom line, pretty simply, is there was a gap between what he requested of the town for his school budget and what Mr. Andrews had budgeted for the schools. And the bottom line is it was about $2.6 million. There are some programs that the school administrator is going to cut, some tuition from the West Academy, not prepaying special education tuitions. There's a gift from Makepeace that he didn't spend last year. It was about $20,000 a year that they give. So he still has that, plus the gift from this year is $40,000. People already notifying him of their retirement. There's some staff savings. The Wareham Middle School Technology Project has been X'd out. Then there were some other shortfalls. The $41,000 for defibrillators from the police department's been cut. And then we get to the real treat, and this is where the town will, and the employees will benefit from this as well, I guess, but we plan to take a 6-week premium holiday from the Healthcare Trust Fund. And before you ask, can we take money out of the Healthcare Trust Fund, the answer is no. But it doesn't mean we don't have to put it in. So it's a little play on words there. But it's quite a bit of money. It's over $900,000, around $941, $951. There's a 5% non-personnel expenditure cut across the school department. And then we have, there are some grade teachers being cut, lower grade. I won't mention the grades because some of those people might be listening. And so then after that, we get down to around $360,000 in other negotiated issues that the the school administrator will be negotiating with his teachers' unions. All in all, basically, it's when you look at the whole picture between the health care premium holiday, which the town will benefit. I'm sure Mr. Andrews will put those numbers into his budget. But, it's quite a bit of money. And as one of the members of the committee, I asked the school superintendent, what happens next year? You can't keep going back to the health care premium, the one real account that we have some good money in. We're going to not put money into it. And his answer was, I believe, next year he has a guarantee from the town of $500,000. Was that about right, Mr. Schneider? It was about half of this he expects from the town side going forward, because they won't have this account to go back into again. That's what I wrote down anyway.
Honestly, Mr. Holmes, I didn't quite hear that part because I was sitting in the other.
Yeah. Mr. Cruz, you recall that? Because when I said, what are you going to do next year? My question was, all right, you hit it for $1 million this year. What are you going to do next year? You can't do it again, obviously. God forbid people get sick. And the answer was that he would expect, he understands he can't do it again next year, right, but that he would expect from the town half of that, $500. in additional, revenue from the town.
Right.
Because we're expanding our tax base and we're expanding all these other things. So that's my report. If anybody else, Mr. Schneider was there at the end. Mr. Cruz, you were there. If there's anything else, but that ends that.
I think that completes that. I have one, the Community Events Committee. The committee is in the process of reviewing applications for 24 events and activities that will take place this year, starting on May 15th and going through the end of the year. Everyone made the deadline of March 15th, so that's quite a few events. And I think there was one or two that's still working on it, but I think they got it straight, so that's it. Anything from the board? Entertain a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, you know what? No.
Yeah.